Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 75th day of the 106th Legislature First Session. We're honored this morning to have Father Ryan Lewis, a personal friend and a friend of many of the senators, pastor of Holy Ghost Catholic Church, Omaha, Nebraska, Senator McDonald's district. Please rise.
Loving and merciful God, we come before you on this beautiful day, acknowledging that we are in your holy presence. You are the creator. You are the giver of every good gift, especially the gift of life itself. This august legislative body convenes this morning on this beautiful spring Nebraska day. We convene for the important work of governance of this, our great state. Bless our state, which we love, assist in its growth, in its prosperity. May the efforts of this legislature lead not only to right order and prudent use of resources, but also to strengthen our state and its citizens in their desire for collective compassion, unified humility, and gratitude for blessings received, and in our desire to be a state that is welcoming, girded with strong morals, and dedicated to the dignity and worth of every human life. Bless our citizen legislators. May they legislate and give counsel, aided always by your prudence, your wisdom, your understanding, your justice, your mercy, your love. May they serve well those whom they represent and the state as a whole. Bless their families who sacrifice for them to serve. Help them this day and throughout their public service to work always for the common good, your common good. May everything we do begin with your inspiration, continue through your divine assistance, and reach completion for your greater honor and glory. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you, Father Lewis. I call to order the 75th day of the 106th Legislature First Session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections.
Thank you, sir. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
I have one item. The Government Committee chaired by Senator Brewer reports LB 109 to general file. That's all that I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members will proceed to the agenda. General File Appropriations Bill LB 600A. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, 600A is a bill by Senator Walls. It's a bill for an act to appropriate funds to aid in carrying out the provisions of LB 600.
Senator Wall is recognized to open LB 600A.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. LB 600A appropriates money from the Health Care Cash Fund to the Foster Care Review Office in order to carry out the provisions for the Nebraska Children's Commission. With that, I would ask for a green vote on LB 600A. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Walls. Is there any discussion on LB 600A? I see none. Senator Walls is recognized to close in the advance of the bill. She waives close and the question before the body is the advance of LB 600A. T in our initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
33 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 600A.
LB 600A advances. Now moving to select file 2019 Senator Priority Bills, LB 86A. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, 86A, Senator Salama, I have no amendments to the bill.
Senator Salama for motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 86A be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance LB 86A to ENR for engrossing. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 86A advances. Members, we're now going to proceed to final reading. I'll need all of you to please be at your desk pursuant to the rules. Members, we're about to commence final reading. If you could all please be at your desks. We'll now commence final reading. LB 96. Mr. Clerk.
Growth Bill 96 by Senator Wayne, a bill of regulating building cost dimension change provision relating to lease building construction cost. For purpose of building construction, economy supports state building construction state, Nebraska, county, state users, state building codes, local building, a county city of age, may administer the first local building code, state building code, currently with subdivision 2 years after an update the state building code, building code, no changes in city village. Adoption of supplemental new edition, appendix, component, as the third edition, the National Building Code, Chapter 11 of 2012 edition, of the National Building Code, local district, introduced the fire person, general state building code. A county city of Government adopts one or more codes as part of the local building notice for use of examination by the public in the offices of the county, city, or village prior to the opposition code, as long as each code is sex. Notwithstanding the provisions of building construction of public any political subdivision shall be negotiated between the political subdivisions of all but such treaties shall next the Ashland of the county, city, village, and the monitoring. Section 3, original section 71, 2064, 04, 64, 06, reissue vice tax, Nebraska are repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 96 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
49 Senators Archblood, Bostelman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, Dorn, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Holler, Hanson, Hildress, Hickelman, Howard, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansing, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none not voting, so resolved. Albright, Erdman, Lowe. Bowles, Kavanaugh, DeBoer, Groney, Howard, Stinner, Wayne.
LB 96 passes. Proceeding to LB 179, Mr. Clerk.
Universal Bill 179, introduced by Senator Hill, to the bill for civil procedures amendment section 25-1902. Following for final words may be vacated by arrest and effective judgment in court or good up during special proceeding in order to deny subject to such motion made zone cover subdivision may appeal pursuant 25-1912 within 30 days to enter such order within 30 days to enter judgment. Section 3, original section 25-1902, revised statute Nebraska is repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 179 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bostelman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregert, Holler, and Ben Hansen, Matt Hansen, Hildress, Hickerman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Salama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting says Bowles, Kavanaugh, DeBoer, Groney, Howard, and Stinner. 43 ayes, no nays, 6 excused, not voting.
LB 179 passes. We'll now proceed to LB 184. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is to dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing with the reading vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
36 ayes, 5 nays to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
The gross legislative bill 184, introduced by Senator Friesen and Lowe, bill for enacting relating to telecommunications technology, adopts the Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 184 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bostelman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clements, Crawford, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregert, Holler, and Hansen, Hildress, Hickelman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Salama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting says Bowles, DeBoer, Groney, Howard, Stinner. 44 ayes, no nays, 5 excused, not voting.
LB 184 passes. Proceeding to LB 375. Mr. Clerk.
Concurrent with 375 by Senator Brewer, bill enacting the public records exchange of leading documents may be held public in repeal section 1. Following records and disposal recording may be held public. All custodian records, personnel, subject to public any routinely directed to information 28 U.S.C. 1232G. Trade secrets, records from Brewer, private attorney relating to the presence of a non-resident inclusive circumstances surrounding the death of an employee. Praises information from negotiated records in the purchase sale by public by the answers of personal property, personal regards information solely pertaining to protection of security of public right. The security against standards and policies of the Department of Revenue and those persons and entities and respect records portions of the public and the library correspondence memorandum records members of the legislators or member of legislators or forms and performers of his or her duties. Records of portions of record given by public body in his name. Collections of architectural library like archive by job application materials submitted by the applicants other than trying to investigate proper candidate. Draft records obtained by Nebraska retirement system, records proper prescription drug section on structures, views, subscription drug monitoring programs. Section 2, original Section 847-1205, revised statute, Sub 2018 is repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 375 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
Voting aye, Sears, Albright, Arch, Blood, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Groney, Hollern, Hanson, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Golderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none not voting, Sears, Kavanaugh, Bowles, DeBoer, Howard, and Stinner. 44 ayes, no nays, one present not voting for, excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 375 passes. Proceeding to LB 411E. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing of the reading vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
34 ayes, 8 nays to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
The gross legislative bill 411, introduced by Senator Shear. It's a bill for enacting the government. It amends sections 18, 25, 15, 23, 149, 202, 25, 12, 32, 221, 223, 230, 231, 32, 10, 02, 08, 10, 12, 13, 41, 11, 21, 1306, revised stats, Nebraska. It changes names and transfers provisionally in the County Civil Service Commission. It changes provisionally in the Metropolitan Utilities Districts, initiative and referendum petitions, municipal economic development programs, county boards, county organizations, sanitary and improvement districts, election provisions, recall provisions, conflicts of interest, and penalty provisions for violation relating to political accountability and disclosure. It harmonizes provisions, provides an operative date, repeals the original sections, and declares an emergency.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 411E pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
Voting aye, Sears, Albright, Arch, Blood, Bosman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hilgers, Hickelman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolaski, Coulterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting no, none not voting, Sears, Bowles, Howard, and Stinner. 46 ayes, no nays, 3 excused, not voting.
LB 411E passes with the emergency clause attached. Our next bill is LB 418. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing of the reading vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
32 ayes, 8 nays to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 418, introduced by Senators Kavanaugh, Bowles, DeBoer, Gregor, Groney, Hunt, McDonald, Quick, Matt Hanson. It's a bill for equaling the state government, amend sections 48193, 9495, 9697, 1108, 81, 8224, 2239.02. It provides for settlement of claims of alien dependents, defined terms, provides for applicability of changes provisionally in claims, and prohibits debt collection while a matter is pending before the Nebraska Workers' Compensation Court. It changes provisions relating to tort claims against the state. It changes provisions relating to state self-insured liability, funded state vehicles, and harmonizes provisions and repeals the original sections.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 418 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
Voting aye. Senators Blood, Bostman, Brandt, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Doran, Friesen, Geis, Matt Hansen, Hilders, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Pansing, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Salama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none, not voting. There's Albright, Arch, Brewer, Erdman, Gregor, Groney, Halloran, Ben Hansen, Linehan, Lowe, Merman, Bowles, Howard, Stinner. 35 ayes, no nays, 11 present not voting, 3 excused not voting.
LB 418 passes. Our next bill is LB 478E.
Resolution Bill 478 by Senators Vargas, Hunt, Lathrop, Wayne. Bill for Neck, Layton, Lewis, Revenue, been Section 727, 412, Section 1. Following evidence is not admissible in any civil or criminal proceeding, all subject to misconduct. Evidence is offered to prove any circumstance in a criminal case. Following evidence is admissible. The base evidence, specific evidence, such similar behavior against civil case evidence for evidence to prove a sexual assault. Serve the evidence, all parties notify the victim or when appropriate before accumulating evidence of the section. Evidence is victim's right. Original Section 77, 412, is repealed. Section 3, since an emergency exists, this act takes effect when passed and approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 478E pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Groney, Halloran, Hansen, Hilders, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansing, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none, not voting. There's Bowles, Howard, Stinner. 46 ayes, no nays, 3 excused, not voting.
LB 478E passes with the emergency clause attached. Our next bill is LB 560. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing of the reading vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
32 ayes, 7 nays, Mr. President, to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 560 is introduced by Senator Geis, bill for calculating revenue taxation. That amends Section 77, 27, 15, 5203, 09, 091, 5211, 5212. Changes provisions relating to tax credits under the beginning Farmer Tax Credit Act and defines the term and harmonizes provisions and repeals the original sections.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 560 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bowles, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Grigert, Holler, Hanson, Hildreth, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Colderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowell, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williamson, Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senators Groney, Howard, and Stinner. 46 ayes, no nays, one present not voting, two excused not voting.
LB 560 passes. Proceeding to LB 570E.
Introduced by Senators Walls, Howard, and Wishart. Bill of Negligent Public Health Welfare Administration changes to trans healthcare cash and state legislators disposed provide powers and duties before reports. In Nebraska Healthcare, the state treasurer shows 6 million, 6 million, July 15, 2017, 6 million, 450, July 26, removes order as trade except some job reduced by amount of property in Nebraska state investment shall advise the state treasury amounts of trust fund shown balance reported. State treasurer shall transfer 10 million Nebraska Medicaid government's general fund on June 28, 2018, 2019 as the legislative notice programs funded through the Nebraska Healthcare until funding for all programs appropriated fund during the FY12 restores the FY12-13 levels. It is intended the legislature, the cost of staff and non-operating costs necessary changes may services provided and effective measures proposed for community service program and aware of subjects of personal organizations, including family relations, social kinds of work options, economic and education advancement, cultural enhancement. The United States Supreme Court further stated that all states and comprehensive effective states waiting list moves at reasonable price could be important ways to ensure and demonstrate commitment to achieving. Appointment of state court advisory committee established in development street franchise committees include public service commissions of hearing and death commission, budgets of advocacy, Nebraska and assisted living orders, the behavioral health organization, advocates for brain injuries, absolutely, and the person who have appropriate. The reports included should be submitted electronically to the legislature. Section 4, original section 76, 11, 81, 6, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, rise to sub 2018 are repealed. Section 5, since an emergency exists, this act takes effect when passed and approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 570E pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bowles, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorner, Reese, Geis, Grigert, Holler, and Hanson, Hildreth, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, Senators Erdman, Groney, Lowe, Howard, Stinner. 44 ayes, no nays, 3 present not voting, 2 excused not voting.
LB 570E passes with the emergency clause attached. Proceeding now to LB 570AE.
Growth Bill 578, Assessor Walls, Bill for Negligent Appropriate Minnesota 2018, Illinois Service, Verse 28, Rules, Structure 1. LBA is amended reagent lead program windows is 995,175,539,37,962,0578. There's included appropriations program FY 17-18, 75 allocated for FY8 cash from Nebraska healthcare for purposes of healthcare research release just following action necessary travel awareness for task forces. And expended general fund exemptions are should be appropriated. No expended program for salaries funds shall be funds for this section. There's hereby appropriate 18,000 federal funds FY18 as evidence of Department of Health Human Services program to carry the provision. Is the town legislative appropriate fund 36459 from Nebraska Healthcare Cash Fund FY21-22 Department of Health. Original laws 2018 LB 944 sections repealed. Section 6 such emergency exists. This act takes effect when passed approved according to law.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 570AE pass with the emergency clause attached? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, please.
Voting aye, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bowles, Bostman, Brandt, Brewer, Breese, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Friesen, Geis, Grigert, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hildreth, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Colderman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. Voting nay, none not voting, so Erdman, Lowe, Howard, Stinner. 45 ayes, no nays, 2 present not voting, 2 excused not voting.
LB 570AE passes with the emergency clause attached. Next bill is LB 595. Mr. Clerk, the first vote is dispense with the at-large reading. Those in favor of dispensing of the reading vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
37 ayes, 7 nays, Mr. President, to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
The gross legislative bill 595 is a bill by Senator Albright. It's a bill for enacting an alternative dispute resolution. It amends sections 25, 29, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 08, 09, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 19, 20, 21, 20, 43, 24, 5, 24, 6, 2, 4, 7. It amends sections 3 and 4, respectively Legislative Bill 354, 106, first session. Restates legislative findings, it defines and redefines terms, changes provisionally in the qualifications of Director of the Office of Dispute Resolution, the membership of the Advisory Council on Dispute Resolution, the Office of Director's duties. It changes provisionally to approved centers, provides for communications made in restorative justices. It provides for immunity and restoration plan agreements that change provisionally and rolling towards statute of limitations. It provides for licensed attorneys to serve as a parenting plan mediators, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonizes provisions, and repeals the original sections.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 595 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
49 Senators Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bosman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Kavanaugh, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Gregor, Groney, Holler, and Hanson, Hilgers, Hickman, Hughes, Hunt, Kolowski, Coulterman, LaGrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Morfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Walls, Wayne, Williams, and Wishart. Voting nay, none. Not voting, sirs Howard and Stinner. 47 ayes, no nays, 2 excused and not voting.
LB 595 passes. LB 155.
Mr. President, I have a motion on the desk. Senator Wayne would move to return LB 155 to select file for specific amendment, that being AM 1611.
Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open on your motion to return the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. This is a bill my freshman year, or area of my freshman year that I had a lot of debate, a lot of conversations about. And as I watched Senator Brewer work tirelessly through this bill, I couldn't help but bring up some issues that I think we as a body have to address in the next 2 years. I'm gonna give you a little quick history of how we got to where we are in public power, but I do hope you pay attention and listen to where we should go, hopefully, in the future. In 1993, this body decided that we should have a formation of a government to help run our public power. Since 1887 to 1933, there were a lot of areas in rural Nebraska that public power or power companies refused to serve. They didn't feel like putting the capital investment to do such a service. So in 1933 is when we started a conversation around public power. By 1946, there were 43 nonprofit or public utility systems to make sure that everywhere in the state of Nebraska you had access to public power. That is the foundation of where we're at today. We are operating off of a 1946 statute or goal instead of a modern day history. Why is that important? Because two things happened that fundamentally shifted our public power. And if you ask anybody in the energy sector, they will tell you. In 2009, when we decided to enter into the Southwest Power Pool, that fundamentally changed what we do. 2014, when the Southwest Power Pool created its new integrated market, that completely changed the operation of public power in Nebraska. Many of my colleagues might think when the lights are on in here that Lincoln Electric is actually powering our lights. That maybe MPPD is actually wholesaling and providing when I turn on my light, boom, it's MPPD or LSE. If you live in Omaha, you might think it's Omaha Public Power District. The reality is, in 2014, we became a part of a commodity system in which we buy and sell energy like we do stocks. So you may not receive anything from Nebraska when you actually turn on your lights on a hot, summer, warm, windy day. Why? Because wind is such tax credit and it's first in, first out because you can't hold it because their technology isn't there for a battery, that wind goes first into the system. You can go on Southwest Power Pool right now and see energy that is costing zero. When we have coal plants right now running, costing millions of dollars. So guess what? That coal plant gets turned down to 50 to 60%. So they can utilize the wind on the grid. And in fact, if you were to move all of Nebraska's generation, there is still enough electricity in the grid to power Nebraska on a regular day. So what does that mean for us as state legislatures? We have what we have. We have assets that are sitting there. We have assets that aren't making money, and no good business model says that. Why I filed this amendment was because of Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings. Our dear friend Warren Buffett got up and said there is no competition on this side of the river. That is why many businesses are choosing to do business on the other side of the river. A World Herald article came out and said that in the commercial market, we've lost significant competition. Our industry rates since 2008 have went up nationally in 8%, but if you adjust them for inflation, it's gone up 29%. What else sparked this is I have a school, not in my district, but a high school in Omaha who wanted to do net metering. Why this touched a chord with me is that when I did the first bond in 2014 for Omaha Public Schools, I wanted to put solar on top of every high school and middle school that we had. And the thought process is we can save dollars, $2 to $3 million, sometimes up to $8 million, depending on how many schools we did, and put that back into our general operations fund. Had that been available at a competitive rate, maybe we would have already a solution to part of our bond issue in OPS, because we could be using that $8 to $10 million for the next 30 years to replenish that bond, our pension, I mean. But we couldn't do it because after 25 kilowatts, there's no law that governs 25 to 250 kilowatts in net metering. So public power has taken upon themselves to stifle anybody who is trying to lower any commercial business who is trying to lower their energy rates and their cost of energy in doing business in Nebraska. Think about this. We live on I-80 and we are just across the street from I-29. Logistical, warehouse, transportation companies could be booming here, but many of those products have to have a certain temperature, and one of their highest costs is energy. We have a high school that can't build a solar power because they've made it economically infeasible. We have logistical companies who I met with last week who reminded me that they have to keep their product at a certain rate, and they are looking to move outside of Nebraska because of their energy rates. Because if they move to Iowa, or if they move to Kansas, they can put up a solar panel that'll generate 100 kilowatts to help offset their costs. So this amendment is to send a shot across the bow to everybody to say, at some point, when we start talking about 93 counties, we start talking about 244 school districts, we also have to talk about public power. That we have to fundamentally change how we think when it comes to public power if we're going to move into the 21st century. The greatest threat to public power is not wind, is not solar, it is a battery. Once a battery, which they've been working on for the last 10 years, and I think will be here in the next 5 years, can store wind energy and solar energy, that makes our coal plants pretty much useless. And we have a $1.5 billion asset sitting in western Nebraska that we will have to pay for somehow. So I would love to have a conversation a little bit today, but I told Brewer I'm not trying to kill his bill. But I do think as we move forward and interim studies are done, we have to make sure that net metering for commercial industry is on the agenda. If you don't like wind in the sandhills, then offer an alternative for us in the city who want to be green. And the fact of the matter is OPPD has the infrastructure to do net metering. The fact of the matter is we're not talking about the farmer down the end of the line that doesn't have the capability or the wire or the infrastructure to generate electricity back. We're talking about cities who can. LES, Omaha Public Power District, can. Let us at least do that so we can start changing how we do public power. If we don't, we are going to be sitting on abandoned assets. We are going to be sitting on an infrastructure that cannot generate. And we will have people continue, like Google and Facebook, buy off of the grid rather than using our facilities to actually buy from. With that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Before proceeding, Senator Gregg, I would like to announce some guests visiting today. We have with us 21 seventh graders from the Wausau Public Schools, Wausau, Nebraska. Those Wausau seventh graders are up in the north balcony. Students, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Debate is now open on the motion. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I couldn't let Senator Wayne's discussion go unanswered, so I respectfully will do that right now. He had a rather eloquent discussion about the SPP. I think he explained it very well. But what I don't think he did talk about very well was the role of renewable energy in Nebraska, and that has actually kept energy prices low. Low indeed. In fact, the SPP service area has some of the lowest energy costs in the entire country. You compare the rates in Chicago, Minneapolis, any other area, and the rates are much higher. In Nebraska, I think if you look long-term, 10 years, 15 years, also has some of the lowest rates in the country. Why is wind so cheap? Well, it does in fact get entitlements from the federal government. But once those entitlements are gone, and they're ending soon, and Nebraska offers no incentives at all. But when that occurs, all wind energy has, there's no fuel cost. So as a result, it is a cheap form of energy. Let's talk about net metering. I did have a bill before this body this year. And I took some of the cues from Senator Wayne, and boy, that bill went nowhere, absolutely nowhere. Where is the greatest opposition? Not OPPD. NPPD was neutral. It's the rural electric companies that had the greatest opposition to that bill. We do need to work on net metering. And I would look forward to working on that with Senator Wayne in the years to come. My bill is still stuck in committee, so it could very well be resurrected and brought back to this body next year. So I look forward to the opportunity. One last thing. Batteries will be a game changer for renewable energy, particularly whether it's solar or wind. Batteries could be the big game changer, and we'll see how that works as battery development gets better in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Wayne, for bringing up an important topic.
Thanks, Senator McAllister. Senator Groney.
I appreciate Senator Wayne's attempts here, but on policy and what we do in this body, folks, too often we're getting bills amended two bills that have gone through the process of hearings, introduction. When we amend things on the floor, it should be change a date, change a policy from shall to may, but it should be on things we've had hearings on, I would think. But that said, I agree with Senator Wayne. If you want to put a solar power on top of your school, go right ahead. I do disagree that I've heard a couple of testifiers already write the obituary for my Sutherland power plant, coal generating power. One of the reasons rural Nebraska doesn't appreciate this, we have surges in times that we need power. When those pivots are turned on, it's a massive use of energy quickly. A coal-fired power plant can do that. Wind cannot. Neither can batteries run a pivot. Batteries are used to start the motors that run the pivot sometimes, but we are realistic. Wind is a dream. Look what's happening in Germany, by the way, with their wind initiative. They're finding out you cannot rely on renewable energy. It's nice to walk your city streets and watch the gas-burning cars and all the lights on and dream about renewable energy with windmills in my district. But that's not reality. Can we do a balancing act? Yes. Can we put some windmills in Memorial Park on the sleigh riding hill in Omaha? I'm all for it. I'll help you. But keep them out of my sand hills. You're not doing us any favors. We have very high-paying jobs at the Sutherland Power Plant. It is a blessing, not a negative to the state of Nebraska. And Senator McCollister, at least he was honest, we have Nebraska public power. We don't have the Southwest electrical pool power, although we do. But when Nebraska Power was Nebraska Power with nuclear plants and coal, we had one of the lowest electric rates in the nation. We have dropped down in the lower end of the top 10 now because of wind and because we're not efficient. It's Nebraska public power. It is not the Southwest pool of energy. Let's remember that. Our rates have gone up in Nebraska because we are not efficient anymore like we used to be when we relied on the jobs and the coal from Wyoming and Sutherland and the nuclear power plants. Dream all you want, save the planet if you want, but I want my lights and I want my irrigation pivots to turn on when we need to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Groney. Senator McCollister.
A couple more points, Mr. President, and I'll stand down. Senator Bosselman pointed out to me that, yes, wind did get some advantages. Nebraska Advantage did get some credits from that. So it's, there is some advantage that Nebraska gives renewable energy. Number two, this energy situation in Germany isn't quite as clear as people make it out to be. They have lignite plants in Germany, and once again, we have people employed in those plants, and they felt it necessary to utilize that dirty form of energy over some of their wind. Not only that, but they contracted forward some of those renewable energy prices about 10 years ago. And as those contracts end, Germany will have lower cost energy as it comes about. One last point. Senator Groney is right. There are times during the summer that we need every form of energy available, including those coal plants. Those pivots use a lot of energy, and the grid can't supply all that energy with renewables. And I don't think it's been necessary to import energy, but those coal-fired plants are necessary during those times of peak demand. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Senator Slama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't planning on speaking on this bill, but I thought it'd be a good idea to get up and remind folks that when we're talking about the growth of renewables, the expansion of renewables, net metering, there's also significant long-term impacts of this shift on rural Nebraska, including job losses. I mean, you only need one or two people to run a wind farm once it's built, so we need to keep that in mind if we're looking towards shutting down our current facilities. But also I'd like to note another form of green energy that's not a renewable, but it has a zero carbon output, and that is nuclear energy. My district is home to Cooper Nuclear Station, the lone remaining nuclear station in the state, which provides around 700 jobs for the area and an economic impact of over $112 million annually. And let's just keep in mind that in addition to wind and solar, there's another green option out there, and it is nuclear. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Salama. Senator Hughes. He waives the opportunity. I see no further discussion. Senator Wayne, you recognize to close on your motion to return the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I did a quick vote count, and I know the vote's not there right now, but I think after the LR study, we'll get there. I just wanted, because there's sometime on final reading when everybody's here, I think it's important for us to raise the issue that is really going to affect us in the next 20 years, and public power is one of them. So I do have a commitment that I've made to Senator Brewer to do an LR on public power this year and look at structurally, but I will make it clear that net metering for commercial will be, if not my priority next year, my priority bill. I believe in it that strongly, and I think if we're going to be a manufacturing and distribution facilities around my district and around Omaha area, this is one way for us to lower cost without going through a tax route. So as we continue to think about 720 and LB 298, understand that energy costs are right there with these companies who are trying to come to Nebraska, and with that, I would like to withdraw my motion.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. The motion is withdrawn. Members, this is our last bill on final reading. If you'd all please be at your desks, we can finish up this last bill, final reading. LB 155, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 155 by Senator Brewer, Boston. We also have private development, renewable energy, directors, change provision, eminent domain, harmonized provisions. Legislature of Nebraska, authority, sovereign state directors, land, natural resources, and unique territory, sand hills, providing here, replace the habitable millions, brand new charity, Nebraska, and home price, large sites, certificates, notify the board when I intend to commence construction, certify both facility meet with requirements, certifies the board the private electric supplier has a good facility, 37 project phases as possible. Board may bring an action in the name of the state of Nebraska for to comply with subdivision A1B of the subdivision A13 of the state requirements jurisdiction. Current jurisdiction transmitted agreement shall address within 10 days to receive written notice combined written acknowledgement with previous developed plan exemption in the section of private developed renewable energy facility, including any successor private electric supplier, no property owner or power plan to provide and require municipal year retirement facility. If a supplier violates Chapter 76, Article 6 by either A, B, or commencing generation, any transmission lines or any facility, such construction, acquisition, or such will join an action bought in the name of the state of Nebraska, and such players comply with 70, Article 10. If the executive director of the board determines the private certify the private electric supplier, if the private electric supplier determines subdivision, section of private electric supplier does not come as certified mail pursuant to such supplier. Upon receipt of request for hearing, the board shall set a hearing date at least 20 days prior to the hearing of the board for its purposes. Private electric suppliers with this report for this violation requirements subject to the 710 before is directed meeting of construction and operation of private developed renewable energy facility. Section 3, original section 7, 8, 10, and 1402, and 1015 reissue by statutes Nebraska are repealed.
All provisions of law relative to procedure have been complied with. The question is, shall LB 155 pass? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
49, Senators Albright, Archblood, Bowles, Bosselman, Brandt, Brewer, Breesy, Chambers, Clemens, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geis, Gregor, Groney, Holler, Hanson, Hildreth, Hickman, Hughes, Kolaski, Colterman, Legrone, Lathrop, Lindstrom, Linehan, Lowe, McAllister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansy, Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Vargas, Wayne, Williams, Wishart. 49, none not voting, Senators Kavanaugh, Hunt, Walls, Howard, and Stinner. 44 A's, no nays, 3 present not voting, 2 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 155 passes. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign, or hereby sign, the following legislative bills: LB 96, LB 179, LB 184, LB 375, LB 411E, LB 418, LB 478E, LB 560, LB 570E, LB 570AE, LB 595, and LB 155. Members, pursuant to the agenda, we move to select file 2019 committee priority bills. Senator Stinner is absent today, and Speaker Scheer has indicated we're going to pass over LB 334 and 334A, which takes us to LB 600. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, with respect to LB 600, I have E&R amendments first of all.
Senator Slama.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 600 be adopted.
Members heard the motion to adopt the ENR amendments to LB 600. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ENR amendments are adopted.
Mr. President, Senator Bowles, I have AM 1483 and 1575. I understand you wish to withdraw those.
The amendments are withdrawn.
Mr. President, Senator Bowles would move to amend with AM 1650.
Senator Bowles, you're recognized to open on AM 1650.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment encompasses three relatively small changes for the body's consideration this morning. The first is a technical fix to the funding stream for the Children's Commission, which was amended into LB 600. It's just a technical change to clarify how those dollars will flow from the Healthcare Cash Fund to the Children's Commission. The second change is a small change to the makeup of the Children's Commission made at the request of the Department of Health and Human Services to include the director of the Division of Behavioral Health, but not include the Division of Developmental Disabilities or Division of Medicaid. So that makeup was at their request, and I think that makeup makes excellent sense for the overall goals of the Children's Commission. The third change amends into LB 600 the contents of LB 332, which again is a relatively minor change to the Bridge to Independence program. Our Bridge to Independence program is a support program for young people transitioning out of the foster care system. The Children's Commission has a subcommittee that makes recommendations related to the Bridge to Independence program. One of their recommendations was to essentially right-size this program. What that means through the vehicle of LB 332 is that we would no longer fund young people who choose to no longer be residents of the state of Nebraska. And in other words, if you move out of the state because you choose to go to school out of state or move with family out of state or join the military, it may no longer be necessary to fund those adult support programs for you. And instead of funding that population, we would fund a more needy population, a population that is in need of more support, and that is kids who have experience with the child welfare system in their history, but rather than aging out of the child welfare system, they will age out of the juvenile justice system. This is a very narrow population of young people who don't otherwise have a home to go to when they age out of the juvenile justice system and have that experience with the child welfare system in their history. It is cost neutral, and it had the support, the unanimous support of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think it is a compromise between advocates and the Department of Health and Human Services. It is cost neutral, and it was unanimously supported by the Health and Human Services Committee. I would very much appreciate your support of AM 1650. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bowles. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Senator Arch.
A question for Senator Bowles, if she'd be willing to
Senator Bowles, will you yield,
respond.
Sure, of course.
Senator Bowles, could you please explain the fiscal note, refresh our memory on funding for this?
Mm-hmm. So funding already exists for the Bridge to Independence program. This This amendment would be cost neutral because we are moving out one population and moving in another. And my conversations with the department and our legislative fiscal analysts say that we can basically right-size the program with the resources that we currently have. Supporting those young people who are out of state through the Bridge to Independence program is actually very expensive because it includes travel, it includes keeping track of those young people, it includes their existing ongoing needs. And the population of young people in the juvenile justice system who would be newly eligible under this amendment is very small. It's small for two reasons. One is that our juvenile justice system does a very good job of trying to find the right place for young people transitioning out of the juvenile justice system before they age out. So we have a relatively small number of kids who need ongoing support. And the second reason that it's a small population is because we're talking about kids who might have a developmental disability or a mental or behavioral health need and can't otherwise transition out on their own. So all in all, the amendment is cost neutral, and I think I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of your time. I hope that answers your question.
That's okay. So LB 332 was heard in committee, of course, but it didn't come to the floor in general file because it wasn't prioritized. Is that right? Is that why you're amending this now to 600?
Right. It is germane to LB 600 as amended by LB 330. So this was just a way to get a relatively small change done that I think better serves the population of kids who are in the Bridge to Independence program.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators Arch and Bowles. Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Mr. President. With Senator Bowles, yield to a question.
Senator Bowles, you yield, please.
Sure.
I'm just not quick enough using my phone to figure this out. So how much, I know it's revenue neutral, but what is the amount of revenue involved here?
Let me pull up the fiscal note here. So the fiscal note says that the bill estimates that stipends for youth, the Bridge to Independence stipend is approximately $760 per month. And I think there were a total of about 24 individuals who may newly qualify under this change that would allow young people transitioning from the juvenile justice system to qualify for Bridge to Independence. And the idea is that the individuals who are being served out of state, who are more expensive, will more than counterbalance that 24 that group of 24 young people who will be served.
Thank you. Is there a total amount, though, on the fiscal note? And I'm sorry, I couldn't pick.
You're okay. It says, assuming the current Title IV penetration rate, which is our matching funds from the federal government, and these kids would qualify, the cost would be about $150,000. 119,000 of general funds and 31,000 of federal funds in 1920. A little tiny bit higher, 158,000 of general funds in 2021. So the cost of the out-of-state kids counterbalances the new kids.
So I don't know if Chairman Howard is here today.
I do not see Senator Howard on the floor at the moment.
Okay, so why wouldn't to Senator Arch's question, why wouldn't Health and Human Services bring this to the floor, either in one of their bills, committee bill?
I think that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to.
But it didn't get voted out of committee.
It did get voted out of committee.
Oh, it did get.
Yep,
okay,
it was unanimously supported by the Health and Human Services Committee.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Senator Bowles.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Senators Linehan and Bowles. I see no further discussion. Senator Bowles, you recognize to close. Your ways closed. And the question for the body is the adoption of AM 1650 to LB 600. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Senator Bowles.
I think I'm going to need a call of the House and a roll call vote.
Thanks, Senator Bowles. It's been a request to place House on call. The question is, shall the House go into call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
19A, 6 nays to place the House under call.
House under call. All senators, please return to your desk and check in. The House is under call. The House is under call. All senators, please return to the chamber and check in. The House is under call. Senator Klosky, check in, please. All unexcused members are now present. The question for the body is the adoption of AM 1650. A roll call vote has been requested. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Arch. I can't hear you, Senator. Not voting. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Bowles, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, not voting. Senator Brandt, not voting. Senator Brewer, not voting. Senator Breesy, not voting. Senator Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Chambers, voting yes. Senator Clements, not voting. Senator Crawford, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator Erdman, not voting. Senator Friesen, not voting. Senator Geist, not voting. Senator Gregert, not voting. Senator Groney, not voting. Senator Holleran, not voting. Senator Ben Hansen, voting yes. Senator Matt Hansen, voting yes. Senator Hilgers, voting yes. Senator Hickelman, voting yes. Senator Howard, Senator Hughes, not voting. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Klosky, voting yes. Senator Coulterman, voting yes. Senator LaGrone, voting yes. Senator Lathrop, voting yes. Senator Lindstrom, voting yes. Senator Linehan, not voting. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McAllister, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator Moorfeld, Senator Moser, voting no. Senator Merman, not voting. Senator Pansy Brooks, voting yes. Senator Quick, voting yes. Senator Scheer, voting yes. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Stinner, Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Williams, voting yes. Senator Wishart, voting yes. 28 ayes, 3 nays on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 1650 is adopted. I raise the call. Anything further on the bill, Mr. Clerk?
Nothing further.
Senator Slama.
Mr. President, I move that LB 600 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members heard the motion to advance the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 600 advances. Moving to select file 2019 Senator Priority Bills, LB 538. Mr. Clerk.
I have ENR amendments, first of all, Senator.
Senator Slama.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 538 be adopted.
Members heard the motion to adopt the ENR amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ENR amendments are adopted.
Mr. President, the next amendment Senator Lathrop, I have AM 1544 with a note you wish to withdraw.
That's true.
Amendments withdrawn.
Senator Lathrop, 1768.
Senator Lathrop, you're recognized to open on AM 1768.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. Good morning. AM 1768 reflects further discussions between my office and the office of Senator Albright and Senator Albright, the Governor's Policy Research Office, and other stakeholders. The amendment makes a handful of specific changes to LB 538, most of which address concerns which were raised on general file by Senator Albright and some others. I promised to work on this before it got to select, and we have. The first change, we've added language to ensure people with devices already in use will not be forced to shut them down while awaiting a final decision from the Revenue Department. Second, we've set an age limit of 19 on those devices, which make it through the state's vetting process. This reflects the existing age limit for lottery keno and was done at the request of Senator Albright. Also, at the suggestion of Senator Albright, we've removed the ability for credit or debit cards to be used as a form of payment in these machines. In addition, we've established a limit on the total number of devices that may be installed at any one location, which is 1 device per 1,000 square feet for a maximum of 15 devices in any one location. Lastly, we have specified that the fees collected for the administration of this program will be placed in the Revenue Department's Revenue Enforcement Fund. This helps ensure that all fees receipts are used explicitly for the purpose of enforcing this act and make it easy for the department and the legislature to monitor this program in case future changes are needed. I want to thank Senator Albright for her willingness to work with me on this between general and select, PRO and others for their contribution to this amendment in the underlying bill, and I ask for your support on AM 1768 as well as LB 538. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Debate is now open on AM 1768. Senator Chambers.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, and Senator Lathrop, words do mean something. Words that may sound alike but be spelled differently will have a different meaning. I always listen carefully when Senator Lathrop speaks because either it confirms something that I already believe or it teaches me something new. In this instance, I need a clarification. Senator Lathrop, at one point, you mentioned stakeholders. Would that word be spelled S-T-E-A-K or S-T-A-K-E? If the bill were mine, it would be spelled S-T-A-K-E. So which way would it have been?
Senator Lathrop, would you yield, please?
I think it's S-T-A-K-E.
And
having nothing to do with beef.
Okay, and it has nothing to do, as it would if it were my bill, with a sharpened piece of wood which can be driven into the heart of an individual who is not liked. It does not have that meaning of stake, does it?
No.
Which meaning does it have for the record so we're completely clear?
So we're completely clear. It would be those people who have an interest in this subject matter.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers and Senator Lathrop. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wondering if Senator Lathrop would yield to a question.
Senator Lathrop, would you yield, please?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. The concern that I have with this, just looking at this very quickly, is why the limit of square footage. Where did the one per, you have to have at least 1,000 square feet per machine. Where did that come from?
So one of the things that Senator Albright and I discussed between general and select was a concern that she expressed during general file debate, which is having a convenience store or a bar turn into a parlor of these cash machines. They may carry the proper decal, but I think they still have a number of people are concerned with the proliferation of these devices, and it was an accommodation to Senator Albright's concern that we not have parlors of these places showing up, or that the convenience store on the corner doesn't have 12 of these.
Okay, thank you, Senator Lathrop. Would Senator Albright yield to a question?
Senator Albright, yield, please.
Yes, I would.
Okay, thank you, Senator Albright. Would you care to expand on your heartburn with this 1,000 square feet a little bit more? I'm just trying to flesh out more why it's in there.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I stand opposed to gambling. I am on this bill to regulate it and make it become a stronger bill for the state of Nebraska if we have to deal with these skilled machines. So my concern in the beginning when I asked Senator Lathrop if he would entertain 4 machines, that's what the state of Iowa does. With 4 machines, you don't have establishments all throughout the state opening up gaming, basically, with these skilled machines that were authorized by, if you would, the Supreme Court, said that they were just games of skill. But when you pay money out, that is what gives me heartburn. And I don't want young children getting started sooner than they need to. I do not want to see more machines than there has to be. So going back and forth, the square footage, I think, helps, because then it's just not everywhere. Everywhere you go, you just don't have games of skill being played throughout the state.
Thank you, Senator Albright. I guess I certainly appreciate your stance on limiting gambling in the state of Nebraska. I guess I am on the other side of that. I think we're missing out on a lot of opportunity for revenue. I've stated before that, you know, this is entertainment for a lot of people. They're willing to spend their entertainment dollars. If there are problem gamblers or problems associated with gambling, they still come back home, and we are paying the bill for that. We're just not receiving any of the revenue. My concern, I guess, I'm still troubled with the 1,000 square feet. You know, I don't see that that's a benchmark. I mean, that's a number pulled out of a hat, if you will, of limitation. I guess I would like to see that eliminated, and I don't know what other benchmark we could put in there. I do agree with the 15 machines, but I think it should be up to the individual proprietor of what they feel the market is going to be in their establishment. I'm assuming these machines cost them money of some sort. It does take up space that they're not able to use to sell other products. So I guess I don't think them just putting a whole wall of these machines in lieu of potato chips and pretzels and corn nuts. I think that we're taking the business decision away from the business owner, and I don't think that's should be the response of the government. In this instance, they should be allowed to allocate their floor space to their best advantage. I'm going to listen to a little bit more of the discussion, but I think that 1,000 square feet is too small. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hughes. Senator Wayne.
Thank you, colleague. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm adamantly opposed, one, to this underlying bill, but this amendment, I think, makes it even more complicated. When you take a square footage of 1,000, you begin to eliminate a lot of opportunities for many charitable organizations to raise dollars for their events and for their organization. More importantly, I think still the issue of this burden. This is an issue where no other place do I know where we allow self-incriminating evidence. It's a constitutional violation. And I just doesn't understand how we continue to move this bill along when there is a constitutional problem. It is shifting the burden. You are turning in a device in which could be used against you criminally. Now, I do have a bill to take care of the criminal part by decriminalizing the gaming altogether. If we're going to say this is an administrative issue and there's going to be a tax issue and the tax is going to have civil penalties, then let's eliminate the criminal device altogether. But for those who have small organizations out in rural Nebraska and in Omaha, and Lincoln who use these as a way to fundraise, we are going to hurt them in a way that I think we are not calculating right now. In addition, if Iowa allows 4, I'm not sure why we're at 1. I mean, we're a fourth of the restriction up there, and again, we're going to lose out on basic opportunities for our organizations to fundraise. I just don't support this underlining bill. I would ask that you vote red on this, and we'll have more conversations when my 2 amendments come up later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. LB 538 was heard before the General Affairs Committee, and it seeks to further define and regulate skilled cash devices. LB 538 is amended by AM 900 and 1278 previously, essentially reaffirmed existing case law determined by the Nebraska Supreme Court, and that is the determination of what constitutes gambling hinges on whether it's predominantly based on skill or chance. In doing this, the bill lays out several criteria for determining that, and anytime you can lay out a process, provide some standards, give the party some guidelines, remove some subjectivity, I think everybody wins. So I think the bill as amended is a good policy improvement, and it provides a needed limitation on the proliferation of these games. And now we have AM 1768, and I want to applaud Senator Albright and Senator Lathrop for working together to arrive at some of the provisions in here, and I do support various aspects of this amendment. Limiting the use of these machines to individuals 19 and over, I think, is good policy for our state, as is prohibiting the use of credit cards to fund play on these machines. And as far as allowing the operation of these machines until 30 days after notification that they are not in compliance with the Act is a reasonable accommodation of the interests of these distributors. It will serve to incentivize the department to issue rules in a timely manner. And it will serve to incentivize the department to make a timely determination on some of these applications. Essentially provides a safe harbor for some of these distributors and has a potential to reduce some lawsuits. And I support limiting the number of these machines as Senator Albright does. And it's my understanding that PRO, was involved in some of these negotiations, and I think they've essentially agreed to this, what's presented in the bill here, maximum of 15, no more than 1 per 1,000 square feet. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's basically the product of negotiations here, which I think it's a reasonable place to be on this. And as far as Senator Wayne's concerns about a shifting of the burden, we talked about that last time, and we're talking about an administrative process here. We're not talking about a criminal process and procedure here. This is administrative, and that's why appeals are directed to the Administrative Procedure Act. And so I'm not concerned about any shifting of the burden. I don't think that should be a concern in this instance. And if you have a machine without a decal in operation and you're going to get prosecuted for having an illegal gambling device, the government still has the burden. They're going to have to prove it's your machine, you operated it, didn't have a decal. And I think we addressed that issue fairly well previously on general file. We moved it forward, and I think it's time to move this amendment and this bill forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Albright.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Foley. Again, I stand to thank Senator Lathrop for taking a look at this, because he certainly didn't have to put an age restriction in there. He didn't have to put the credit card restriction in there. And I do believe this just regulates the establishments today that are not in compliance, and they'll have the time to come into compliance and to get the right machines. But I disagree with Senator Wayne saying that there'll be a problem for them in the future, because I think it spells it out in the amendment 1768. And I just want people to think about, there are people that are going to, want to do a vote again of the public whether they want to go gambling throughout our state. You know, they have Keno already, you have lottery, you have these machines, these skilled machines that you can play. I think we are going above and beyond allowing things to happen behind the scenes. I appreciate this bill being able to restrict some of those bad machines that are out there, and I only can hope that those on the floor would not want to change this up any. We can certainly revisit it next year and see how things are going, and see where we land if there is an initiative that changes things. But I do rise to talk about the people who do have problems with this. And I don't care if you're going throughout the state and the other 90 counties that want a machine in their establishment. They do make a lot of money. The people that own the establishments don't own the machines. I'm sure they just lease them from these companies that make the correct machine that's a skilled game. So I just want to caution people that for every dollar that they put in one of those machines, we're spending $3 just to take care of their woes, to try to win back their homes, their families, their vehicles, their children. You know, if you want to spend your paycheck on one of those games versus taking care of your family, that I have an issue with. And I don't think that the state of Nebraska needs to try to help with that. Whether people say that they can go gamble regardless, they can go to Iowa, they can go to any of the reservations that have a casino, that is not something that I rise in favor of. I am on this bill for the regulations and to take into consideration how many are out there. So with that, I'll just yield my time back to you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator Albright. Senator Lathrop.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues, once again. I'd like to respond to a statement Senator Wayne made about these machines and the fact that there's somehow self-incrimination involved in this process. This happens all the time, right? So amusement rides is one thing that comes to mind. We have now the fire marshal, used to be the Department of Labor, goes out and looks at amusement rides that are put out by these traveling operators when they set up at your church festivals. And once a year, they're required to do an annual inspection and place a sticker on there that says this has been inspected by the state of Nebraska, and whatever comes along with that. Presumably, it means it's a safe amusement ride to be on. This process is no different, and this bill is about trying to provide a practical enforcement mechanism. Remember, right now what they do is the State Patrol goes and picks up a machine, they have it tested, then they file a ticket or cite the operator, and the operator then has to go through a trial just to determine whether or not his machine or her machine is a device of gambling or a device of skill. We're doing that at the front end, so now we're going to eliminate those machines that are essentially slot machines. There's nothing about this that is changing the burden of proof or creating some kind of testifying against yourself or incrimination. Colleagues, the concern this morning, it sounds like, is with the number of machines per facility. In an agreement that I reached with Senator Albright, we landed on this language. I know that you may have VFWs or something like that where the 1 per 1,000 is a problem. Senator Wayne is going to offer an amendment to strike that 1 per 1,000. I think it's been filed or will be, that strikes that 1 per 1,000. So I would ask you to move AM 1768 to LB 538. And if you want to take up the question about whether there should be a limit per 1,000 square feet of space by the person who is providing these to their customers, we can do that on the Wayne Amendment. But don't not vote for 1768 because of that, if you wouldn't mind. Once again, I would encourage your support of the amendment as well as the bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have in that regard. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Is there any further discussion on AM 1768? I see none. Senator Lathrop, you recognized to close on the amendment. He waives close and calls for the body's the adoption of AM 1768 to LB 538. Those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted here too? Record, please.
32 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. President, on the adoption of Senator Lathrop's amendment.
AM 1768 has been adopted.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne, I now have AM 1511 in front of me.
Senator Wayne, you recognized to open on AM 1511.
Thank you, colleagues. Bear with me. I wanted to make sure we're on the right amendment.
It's the one that starts out with fantasy context.
We are on the right one. Thank you, colleagues. Mr. President and colleagues, we are talking about regulating an industry, regulating something that we would, to determine whether something is a game of chance or a game of skill. Well, this amendment is about a game of skill. This is to add and create a fantasy contest acts and basically it'll create a system for daily fantasy contest operators like FanDuel or DraftKings to have to register with the Department of Revenue to do business in this state, and it would allow them to operate in the state legally. Why is that important? Because currently, there is no regulations at all when it comes to fantasy sports, completely at all. What we heard on this bill and the underlining bill is that we gotta have regulations to determine what is a game of skill and what is a game of chance. Well, the Supreme Court multiple times have said fantasy sport is a game of skill. It is not a game of chance. Therefore, it is not gambling. This is not expanded gambling. This is a way for us to regulate an industry that is currently going on in our state anyway, unregulated. We have fly-by-night fantasy sports operators who are taking advantage of individuals because it's not regulated. This will allow for the regulation. Now, I will say that this bill had a hearing, LB 137. It was before the General Affairs Committee. It came out of the General Affairs Committee and is sitting on the floor. I have supported this bill for the last 2 years, and that's why I'm putting this bill on this amendment on this underlining bill. If we're going to talk about regulating and determining what is gambling and what is not gambling, then this body needs to be consistent. We need to make sure that we are regulating those things that are not gambling and making sure we are driving revenue off of this. Again, the federal government does not think this is gambling. Supreme Court does not think this is gambling. Fantasy sports is a thing that you can play on your computer, on your phone, and multiple people play it in the state of Nebraska. I would ask for a green vote. I would like to hear a debate on this. Hope people are engaged on this conversation, because we continue to talk about, and many of us don't support gambling for the reasons of being taken advantage of, for the reasons of all these negative consequences. I'm not one of those people. And in fact, within 95 miles of most of Nebraskans, 95% I should say, 80% of Nebraskans live within 90 miles of a gambling facility. Gambling is here in Nebraska. We just don't have the revenue from it. But let not be confused. This is not gambling. This bill is about fantasy sports. You get in the pool, you have some fun, you bet on some game, but you don't bet as far as dollars. You're in a pool and you're going one-on-one with individuals who also have a series of players. And you have to analyze those players to make sure they're not hurt, make sure they're not sick, what defense they play in. Can the quarterback throw against a 5-4 versus a 4-3? Those are the things that go on, and why there's so many factors that go into fantasy sports. They've deemed it as a skill because you have to take time to analyze how to play this type of, in this type of industry. So this is not gambling, but if we're gonna be consistent, let's be consistent. We need to regulate this industry, and that is why I am asking you for a green vote, because currently it is not regulated. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Debate is now open on AM 1511. Senator Lathrop.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I'm going to have to oppose 1511, and I will tell you that apparently there was some kind of significant debate about this bill last year. I wasn't here, of course. I don't know anything about the bill. I don't know anything about the history. I do have some concerns that if we affix this to 538, that it's going to drag it down, and 538 will suffer the same fate that fantasy sports did last year. That's my concern and the reason for my opposition. And on the subject matter, I really can't speak to it because I'm not conversant with fantasy sports, whether it is or isn't gambling, whether it will draw its own crowd of opposition, which would in the end bring down LB 538. So I would at this time oppose AM 1511. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning again, colleagues. I oppose AM 1511. This is an expansion of gambling in our state, plain and simple. That's why I opposed this bill, or this amendment reflects a bill that we had in the General Affairs Committee, and it was actually voted out of committee 5-3, and I certainly opposed it, had several reasons for doing so, and I'll talk about them in a little bit. But I hear the folks talk about, fantasy sports they're here, we're already doing it. Well, we're already doing a lot of other destructive, illegal behavior in this state, and we're not going to legalize it just because it's going on. And folks have talked about the potential revenue to be generated by this, and the revenue under the language of this amendment, it's easy to overstate the revenue. It's not going to amount to much, near as I can tell, but somebody might have other opinions on that. But you look at the language of the bill, and we're talking about the gross revenue, but I believe that gross revenue is defined essentially as the net profits after winnings are paid out. And so why did I oppose this bill specifically? Page 4, section 4, I believe that's the right section, we're making an exception to the Public Records Act with this bill. Typically, those exceptions are found in the Public Records Act itself at 84-712. Here we're making an exception without putting that exception in the right statute. The proponents also suggest strongly this is a game of skill. Well, on page 7, section 8, we're saying with this amendment that a person engages in gambling if they participate in a fantasy contest, not conducted in accordance with this act. So essentially, by the language of this bill, we are admitting that playing fantasy sports is illegal gambling. And this bill seeks simply to carve out an exception for some of these operators. Page 4, section 5, we provide that the department, quote, shall not adopt and promulgate rules and regulations limiting or regulating game rules and other things, including statistical components. If we were going to allow this and regulate this, why wouldn't we allow our department to promulgate rules governing statistical components? That sounds like a recipe for problems for the average participant in this game. And Senator Wayne, would you yield to a question, please? A couple questions.
Senator Wayne, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. I apologize for not giving you heads up on this beforehand, or I certainly would have if I'd thought about it. But on page 7, section 7, we talk about penalties for the same transaction or occurrence. Do you have any insight on what the same transaction or occurrence would be?
You said page 7?
I believe so, yes.
My amendment, page 7, doesn't have that language.
Page 6, I believe. My fault.
What was your question?
What constitutes the same transaction or occurrence?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, very good. You know, if we're going to put a penalty in there, we need to be specific on what we're talking about. And but yeah, we can sure talk about that off the mic.
I have my light pushed so I can answer your question.
Sure.
1 minute.
And at one point here, the language provides that I think it's page 5, section 6, we allow people to restrict themselves from this play. And Senator Wayne, would you yield to another question?
Yes.
Do you know why we would allow people to restrict themselves from playing this game or participating in this?
Because if they want to not participate and feel that they made a household decision not to, they can make that decision to restrict themselves like we do in a lot of other areas. People can restrict themselves from a lot of things.
Okay, thank you. But it would seem to me that, you know, you play this game by choice. Nobody's forcing you to play this game. Why would we put a provision in there to allow people to restrict themselves? Is it because they are concerned about having an addiction to gambling, concerned about overplaying this game and causing themselves or their families problems?
That's time, Senators.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Breeze and Senator Wayne. Before proceeding, Senator Vargas announces 2 very special guests visiting today. We have with us the Senator's wife, Lauren Vargas, and their 3-month-old daughter, Ava K. Vargas, all with us under the north balcony. Please rise and welcome to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion on the amendment, Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I originally was going to stand down on this bill, but because it is my bill that Senator Wayne is attempting to amend, I thought I'd give a little background and speak a little bit on the bill. At this time, I'm not sure how I feel about the amendment or Senator Lathrop's bill. I'm going to listen to the debate, but I want to kind of give you some clarification on what LB 137 is about. Many of the people that are standing here that are going to be in opposition to this bill are the same people that were very anxious to tax Nebraskans to help Nebraska with their budget. And although 137 is not going to generate a giant amount of income, it will generate, we feel, based on the amendment that we brought forward, a minimum of $100,000 and more a year for the state of Nebraska for our general fund. One of the things I worked on this last summer was trying to find unique ways to generate revenue. And Senator Lathrop is correct. This bill was brought last year by Senator Larson, but I feel that the debate last year really never touched down on how the process works and what it's about. I've spoken to many senators, such as Senator Merman, who I hope will yield to a question, and others, including some of the female senators who have participated in fantasy sports. It is a game of skill. It's not like a slot machine that you pull down and it's anybody's chance as to what's going to happen with that slot machine. You have to pick your players, and based on the skill of those players is how well you're going to do. And I think it's really interesting how Nebraska is pushed by a certain organization consistently, told that we need to spend millions of dollars to help people with their gambling addictions, even though the vast majority of them are coming over from Iowa with those gambling addictions. And we don't think twice about that. And we stand and we say how we're against expanded gambling. I'm against expanded gambling too. I don't want a casino in Nebraska. But over and over and over again, you can nitpick on this, but the courts are clear that fantasy sports is not about expanded gambling. With that, I would ask that Senator Merman yield to a question.
Senator Merman, would you yield to a question, please?
Yes.
Senator Merman, I hate to put you on the spot, but would it be correct in saying that you and your family members have participated for a very long time in fantasy sports?
Yes.
And what's been your experience with this? Have you lost your home?
No. It's a good experience. I don't feel it's gambling.
Okay, and it's been a good family activity, if I understood you correctly, that you've done together?
Well, it's not so much a family activity as with friends.
Okay, with friends. And would you say that in general you're a conservative person?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Senator Merman, and I appreciate you being honest. You know, we do a really effective job on this floor of putting fear into people. And we put that fear into people based on antiquated ideas. We get a lot of our information from a specific organization that really is 20, 30, 40 years behind of what's really going on in the world today. We are willing to spend, again, millions of dollars to help 1 to 3% of Nebraska's population with a gambling problem, and I don't see a problem with that, but it's hypocritical when we have an opportunity to regulate something that already exists, to generate income, no matter how small, while we are willing to pretend we don't care about that millions of dollars that we spend on the gamblers to help them, and we pretend that it's okay to go ahead and tax Nebraskans because we're trying to balance our budget. But we're not willing to open the door to generate income on something that already exists. And so it was not my idea to bring this bill forward on this bill, Senator Breezy, but it did get voted out of committee, and I want to make sure that you remember that. We do have an opportunity to do something different. Please don't come up to the mic and read everything that Nebraska, the Good Life Gambling Group, gives you. Let's talk about what's really at hand, which is regulating something that already exists. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Senator Breezy, will you yield to some questions?
Senator Breezy, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Breezy, do you think bank shots is gambling?
Well, Nebraska Supreme Court addressed bank shot in the, well, we call it the bank shot case. I don't recall what the exact name is. And they determined, pursuant to existing interpretation of existing law, it's not gambling. Bank shot was determined to be predominantly a game of skill.
And that is because our Supreme Court said it was a game of skill. That's
yes,
the
in
reason.
interpreting constitutional provisions and interpreting prior case law, I believe.
So why do you take a different opinion when it comes to the courts determining that fantasy sports is not gambling?
Well, I don't know that the Nebraska Supreme Court has addressed that issue.
But the U.S. courts have.
Well, the Nebraska Supreme Court hasn't.
But you would agree that the United States Supreme Court is the law of the land, correct?
Well, like I said earlier, according to the language of the bill and the amendment we're dealing with here, we're essentially signing off in saying that fantasy sports is illegal gambling unless conducted pursuant to this act. So we're admitting right in the bill here that it is gambling.
Well, what if we wrote a bill that said that, well, isn't it essentially what we're doing with these underlining bill? If they're not bank shot and they have a game of chance, we're admitting that there's gambling too?
What was that, sir?
So the underlining bill says that you have to have the Department of Revenue determine whether it's gambling or not, correct?
Yes,
So
on those gray machines.
So those gray machines, we're admitting that they can be used for gambling too, correct?
Some of them could be, and that's what the purpose of the bill and the amendment, the bill and the amendment we're talking about here instead of this amendment, that's
Correct.
the purpose of it, to make that determination and to lay some groundwork to help them make that determination.
And in the underlining bill, if they are found to be gambling devices, there's a civil penalty associated with it if they are played, correct?
There can be, as per the distributors.
So then there's no difference whether, if they're not regulated as a fantasy sports, there's a penalty associated with playing the game or playing or running a business outside of the Fantasy Sports Act. That's also a penalty. That's consistent with the underlying bill, isn't it?
To a certain extent.
So then we are being consistent whether a bill mentions gambling or not. The functionality of both bills are saying the same thing, that if you operate outside of what we deem to be not gambling, it is considered gambling and therefore a penalty is associated with it, correct?
I'll take your word for that.
So then, if our courts have determined that bank shot is okay, but they relied on the same U.S. courts that relied on the fantasy sports to be okay and consider not gambling, I guess I don't understand how you're making a distinction between the two.
The Nebraska Supreme Court didn't rely on U.S. Supreme Court or even federal court decisions in determining the legality of the bank shot machines. They relied on their own precedent.
Their precedent is determined from the same precedent established by the Supreme Court, established by the Court of Appeals, that allowed for the factoring of tests, correct?
No, not relative to bank shot. It was prior case law dealing with our constitutional amendment, I believe a provision of our Constitution and statutory interpretation. So they were relying on their own precedent, weren't looking to outside courts.
So then what would you say if there is a fantasy machine that meets the definition underneath the Department of Revenue's placed in a building in Nebraska?
If it meets their approval, pursuant to what we've laid out here, what's been laid out here in the amendment, a machine like that would be legal.
So then you're not necessarily against fantasy sports. You just don't like it being done from your cell phone. You'd rather be done from inside of a facility.
Well, in general, it's my view that fantasy sports are not a game of skill. And essentially, like I say in the language here, we're admitting as much. We're saying that it is illegal gambling unless it's done pursuant to this act, pursuant to this carve-out for these companies that want to put it in place in our state.
And we're essentially saying the same thing underneath the underlying bill, too, for devices.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Parisi. Senator Arch.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Wayne, could I ask you a question, please?
Senator Wayne, yield, please.
Yes.
Is fantasy sports in the state of Nebraska at the current time illegal if you participate in it?
It's a gray area, just like the gray machines. We don't know.
I guess my understanding is that at the present time, I mean, when I sat through that hearing, as did you, and we heard the issues, I guess my understanding was that you could participate in fantasy sports. However, the passing of this bill then would, I'll use the term loosely, legitimize that, and we would declare by passing this bill that fantasy sports is legal within the state of Nebraska, that this is not outside the law. Is that your understanding?
Well, no, it's actually a gray area, just like these devices, is that we currently, I think over 100-something thousand, or actually I think it was 400,000 people participate in the state of Nebraska. We just don't know because it's not regulated. Just like with the underlying bill, it's not illegal until it's caught or until somebody prosecutes it. And we're trying to define what's illegal and what's not. And that's what we're trying to do in this bill or amendment, define what fantasy sports is and what it is not.
So we would say with the passing of this bill that fantasy sports is not gambling. It would be a definitive statement by this legislature that it is not gambling.
It is not gambling as it meets the requirements and the type of game that is played. It's not the sports betting.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Wayne. I guess as I sat through the committee hearing, one of the things that surprised me, and it caused me to kind of cock my head just a little bit, was when industry came in and was a proponent of this. Those who are involved, the industry involved in fantasy sports, asked for regulation. There was discussion of possible taxation. No problem with that. And I asked the person representing the industry, why is it that, I mean, you don't hear many industries coming into committees and saying, please regulate and tax us. And that puzzled me. And I think it goes to the issue of this bill and this amendment in this particular case, putting the stamp on fantasy sports and saying we believe that it is not gambling, and it legitimizes fantasy sports. And I don't know that we were ready to do that. And I guess that's what caused me to vote no in the committee, is that are we ready to say that? Are we ready to say this is safe? I mean, we know that this, as far as game of skill goes, this is not baseball. This is not in that category of game of skill, but rather it is, and I think Senator Wayne said it well, it's within that gray zone, that gray area, is it or isn't it? But with the passing of this amendment, we have declared that it is not gambling, and it is legitimized within the state of Nebraska, and frankly, I just wasn't ready to do that without further study. So that's why I voted no, and will vote no on Amendment 1511. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Arch. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. In terms of this amendment, I'm way more inclined to regulate something that's definitely already going on in Nebraska instead of telling people we're going to tax their vet bills or we're going to tax water for them. This is something that makes a lot more sense to me. I'm going to be opposed to this amendment because I feel like it's a poison pill for the bill that Senator Lathrop has worked so hard on, but I admire and I'm amused by what my friend Senator Wayne is doing, and I will yield him the rest of my time.
Thanks, Senator Hunt. Senator Wayne, 4 minutes 20.
Thank you. Again, colleagues, this is a very simple bill. We keep saying whether it's gambling, whether it's not, and the fact of the matter is there's no court in the country has found this to be gambling. In fact, they consistently continue to say that it's not. And for us to sit up here and say we know more, I guess, Senator Breezy, would you yield to a question?
Senator Breezy, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Would you be in favor of an amendment that says we will send it to the Department of Revenue to determine whether it's gambling or not?
No, I don't believe so.
Well, isn't that what we're doing with the underlining bill to determine what's gambling and what's not gambling?
Yes, it is.
So what's the distinction on that one?
Underlying bill has had a committee hearing, has dealt with the issue you're talking about there, we've discussed and dealt with the standards that we're going to provide the Department of Revenue with. You know, we've laid out a list of standards for the Department of Revenue to use and how to address those issues. You're talking about telling them right now, well, just without a hearing, we're going to send something to them that, hey, you figure this out for us too while you're at it. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. But bring a bill next year and we can try it. I'd be willing to entertain the bill next year. We can have a hearing on it.
Thank you. Senator Arch, similar question. Would you yield?
Senator Arch, for you, please.
Would you be okay with a bill that
Certainly
allowed?
I will.
You would be okay with it?
No, certainly I yield.
Would you be okay with a bill that allows the Department of Revenue to look at fantasy sports and determine whether it is gambling or not?
I would agree with Senator Breezy. I think that's a worthy bill to bring to committee and have a hearing about that.
So now I want both of you guys to think about, can we have a bill that is different or on opposite sides of federal law? Senator Breezy, will you yield to that question?
Senator Breezy.
Yes, I'll yield.
Can our state law be contrary to the findings of federal law?
Well, normally the Supremacy Clause would tell us no, but in this situation, this isn't an issue of federal law. We're talking about determining what constitutes gambling in Nebraska, and that's an interpretation of our state constitution, state statute, and relevant case law from the Nebraska Supreme Court. It's not a federal issue.
So you think somebody has to get prosecuted first in order for them to raise the constitutional issue, or walk me through how that gets before the Supreme Court unless we pass a bill?
I would say yes.
So then we need this bill in order to have a test case to go up to the Supreme Court, wouldn't you agree?
Well, I'm not going to pass legislation just to generate a lawsuit.
Oh, I don't think we'll be generating a lawsuit.
Or a criminal matter, excuse me.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. I do appreciate the conversation. Now, we did have a hearing on this bill. We did deal with all the issues on every other bill. We aren't circumventing our process. And the fact of the matter is, federal government has already said this is not gambling.
1 minute.
Oh, thank you. The federal government and federal courts have determined multiple times that this is not gambling. But here we are, wanting to wait for a test case that can never come because there's no law regulating it. And Senator Arch is right. The industry came in and said, please regulate me. They are trying to get a handle on all of this themselves and came up with model legislation to regulate themselves. The industry is saying, please regulate me. Now, just pose that or compare that to the LB 538 underlining bill, where no one in the industry is really saying regulate me. Most people who are operating in this area is saying leave me alone, except for one person who produces bank shot, because that's the only case that's been before the Supreme Court.
That's time, Senator Williams. You're next in the queue. You may continue. 5 minutes.
But the rest of the industry is not saying that. They're saying, leave us alone, we're fine. It is the prosecutors who are saying, well, we don't have time. The sheriff is saying, we don't have time. We can't figure this out. So if the prosecutors and sheriffs are saying, we need help regulating this industry, do you not think it's a go-around to put it in the Department of Revenue underneath the administrative statute when the prosecutors and the criminal sides are the ones having the problem with it? That's a go-around. That's taking away your Fourth Amendment legal search and seizure. That's taking away your right to a jury. That's taking away your right to criminal self-incrimination. And I'm just appalled that Senator Hilgers hasn't engaged in this conversation more, because every time I get up and I hear him not agree with the bill, it's typically on the constitutionality of a bill. Senator Breezy talks about the constitutionality of a bill. Most attorneys in here have said one time or another, Senator Lathrop, during the right to work or right to farm, constitutionality of the bill. But on this one, we're ignoring it completely. That you are going to allow the government to take a statement or a report from you and use it against you without you having the right to counsel. Not only that, if they decide that it is gambling, it's underneath the APA. What does that mean? Your appeal process is, did they follow their own procedures? Was it arbitrary and capricious? You have no authority to go back. If you don't know what arbitrary and capricious is, in the other world, in the civil world of litigation, it is unreasonable. So far out there, you can't think of it. It is what we call an abuse of discretion in trial work. And Senator Lathrop, will you yield to a question?
Senator Lathrop, would you yield, please?
Yes.
How many times have you seen abuse of discretions being overturned at the Supreme Court level in Nebraska?
I couldn't tell you. No, they do that from time to time. Yes, I see it happen when in those cases, for example, domestic relations, when they say effectively that the trial court's entitled to deference, they saw the witnesses, they reviewed the exhibits, and we're only going to overturn them for abuse of discretion, and they do it all the time.
And that happens in the cases where they don't follow some logic or procedure or a connection of reasonableness on how they got to their decision. Isn't that correct?
Well, it can happen because they exercise judgment outside of the broad norm that we provide for trial courts.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. That is my point. Outside of the broad norm. So abuse of discretion is almost similar, and actually it's less. I mean, it's higher than arbitrary and capricious. It's got to be completely outside of the broad norm. And that's what we're saying that allows these people, our state, to determine whether you have a criminal gaming device or not. Because if you choose to use it, you will be criminally charged. And they have already got an admission from you and a record from you before you even start. That's a huge fundamental problem in this bill. Again, while we are trying to regulate gambling, I appreciate that. Now, I'm on the opposite side. Of course, I would legalize gambling for property tax relief and funding education tomorrow, if I could. The fact of the matter is you don't have to go across the river in my district no more. You literally can just drive to it in my district because of Carter Lake. So we're on the opposite sides of that.
1 minute.
But what we can agree on is there should be regulation. And you have an industry saying we want to regulate better. We want to regulate and be consistent from state to state on how we operate. And we're telling them no. We are saying we know what's better for the industry than the industry expert. That is like saying I know what's better for a farmer when I don't farm. But we're okay with that. That's just mind-blowing to me when I think about all the conversations we have here. This is not expanding gambling. This is about being able to regulate an industry that is asking to be regulated. And if you believe this is expanding gambling, and if Senator Lathrop believes this is a poison pill, then his underlining bill is supporting gambling. His underlining bill is expanded gambling. Otherwise, Senator Albright would not have had her concerns about limitations. Because in her mind, they're all the same.
That's time, Senator. Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Lathrop.
Colleagues, my friend Senator Wayne reminds me of sometimes when I'm in court and I am trying a case and there's the lawyer on the other side is throwing up dust in the air, just throwing up doubt and dust and making things seem confusing and like it's a big problem and everything I'm talking about is somehow misguided. So we offer an amendment dealing with fantasy sports, and then the argument vacillates between not liking the underlying bill to fantasy sports and back again, and we throw in the Constitution. You know, we regulate in this state a lot of things. We regulate what can be in an insurance policy, right? You want to write insurance in this state, the Department of Insurance is going to look at your policy and see if it comports with the things we've said need to be in there or can't be in there. You want to run an amusement ride company, you got to take your amusement ride in or have the fire marshal come out and put a sticker on it. This is no different than that. So to the extent that's some of the dust that's been thrown up in the air, let me assure you there's not a constitutional problem with this bill. There's not. I also want you to know that 1511 came out of committee apparently 5-3. I don't have a dog in that fight, okay? But I do know what it took to get 538 to select file. I have been working with policy research. I have been working with the governor's office. I have been working with people who have concerns about the subject matter, and I've been working with people who know the industry. This thing has gone through so many rewrites that I have a conversation with my LA every time he brings me a new one. Which one are we on, and does it have the last 4 things that we changed? This has taken a lot of work to get 538 here. I don't need something on it that's going to be a drag. We don't know if it's going to get signed. We're taking care of a real problem here, okay? It may have a cousin over in the fantasy sports world. That's a bill that made it out of committee but was never prioritized. I don't know the work that's gone into it. I don't know who likes it and who doesn't like it. I don't know what it's going to do or if it's going to create drag on 538, okay? When it's up here as a freestanding bill, I'll give it a look. Maybe it makes sense. But I'll say this, and it's that time of year, select file, we're down to the last 10 days or something, and people are gonna try to hook stuff on. Some of it, I call them hitchhikers, some of the hitchhikers are okay. Like everybody goes, that's good policy, that's something that ought to be there. And some of them are either a poison pill or they're going to create drag or bring me a veto. I don't need that stuff. This has taken a lot of work. I've put a lot of work into this. Senator Albright's put a lot of work into this. Policy research has put a lot of work into this. I would appreciate you voting red on 1511 and move LB 538. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish I could have been here for the whole time. I'm enjoying the conversation so much, I'm going to yield my time to Senator Wayne.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Wayne, you're recognized for 4 minutes 45.
Thank you. Again, we're just having a conversation. I'm kind of getting a vote count going. I'll see where it's at, and I'm not afraid to pull it. And this is not a poison pill. But I do have to ask Senator Lathrop some questions and Senator Breezy some questions. Senator Lathrop, will you yield to a question?
Senator Lathrop, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
Ooh, that was almost like Senator Brewer.
Well, I'm excited about the prospect.
Was the 1,000 square foot, did that have a hearing?
Oh. I don't think it needed a hearing. I don't know what conversation happened, or I don't recall what conversation happened at the hearing relative to how many of the lawful machines can be in any one establishment.
But going from an unlimited number, thank you, Senator Lathrop. Senator Breezy, will you yield to a question?
Senator Breeze, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Going from an unlimited number at an establishment, as long as they were being proven to be not gambling, to 1 to 1,000, do you think that's a significant change?
No, not overly. It's a reasonable change. It's a reasonable tweak to the language, addressing some of the concerns brought up, perhaps not at the hearing on this bill, but some of the concerns brought up by Senator Albright at the hearing on her bill.
I don't require the number of devices being discussed at all during any of the opening bills. It was whether the devices were gambling or not, correct?
And I don't recall that either if we did.
So do you think we were giving the public a fair shake when they went from fighting the bill, going to unlimited, as long as they were not gambling, to now they can maybe only have one in their entire establishment, even if it's determined not to be gambling? Do you think that should have had a hearing?
I don't have any problems with that. I don't think that's a significant enough change that it would need to be discussed at a hearing.
But it's a significant enough issue that we have to have an amendment on it to bring people to the table. You don't think it's significant enough to have a hearing?
No, not really.
Thank you. Again, colleagues, I think there's some fundamental issues with the underlying bill. I just want this body to be consistent. Whether Senator Lathrop read the underlying bill, call it dust, call it kick up, call it throwing spaghetti at a wall to see what lands, doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, this is not expanded gambling. If we're arguing that these machines have to determine what is expanded gambling and what isn't, and our Department of Revenue is going to do that because we are trying to regulate the non-gambling, then we should be supportive of the underlying bill. We should be supportive of the underlying bill. But I see that we're still not. So with that, I'll withdraw my amendment.
AM 1511 is withdrawn. Before proceeding, Senator Moorfeld would like to recognize some guests today. We have with us from the U.S. State Department's International Leadership Program promoting cybersecurity, participants from Guatemala, Ireland, Mexico, Pakistan, Panama, and Slovakia. Those guests are all with us on the North Balcony. Guests, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. And Speaker Scheer has with us 24 7th and 8th graders from the St. John's Lutheran School in Battle Creek, Nebraska. Those 7th and 8th graders from St. John's are with us in the North Balcony. Students, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Mr. Clerk, is there anything further on LB 538?
There is, Mr. President. Senator Wayne would move to amend with AM 1512.
Senator Wayne, recognized to open in AM 1512.
Hello, colleagues. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is a simple bill that is very, very simple in the sense of I want everybody to be consistent. If we are going to say we're going to make the department determine and it's going to be civil penalties, then let's remove the criminal provision of a gaming device. It can be all handled civilly now. If you have a gaming device, you will be fined. We're being consistent. If you send it in and it's determined to be a gaming device, you should not have it in your facility, and nor should it be sold to you. If it is, there is already a civil penalty under LB 538. So in the efforts of making sure we lower in prison population, Senator Lathrop, I think we should decriminalize the gaming device, although you won't go to prison with a Class 3 or Class 2 misdemeanor. I just thought I would throw that in there because he says I'm throwing up dust today, so I want to throw some more dust up. More like chalk, like LeBron, chalk. Anyway, I do think it's important, though, on a serious note, that if we're going to be consistent about civil penalties, then be consistent. So I am going to ask for an up or down vote, but I'm not going to have a lot of discussion on it. It's just saying that we remove the criminal aspect of a gaming device. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Is there any discussion on AM 1512? Senator Lathrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Wayne yield to a question
Senator
or
Wayne,
two?
would you yield, please?
Yes. Senator Wayne, I was trying to pull your amendment up and listen to you at the same time, and I'm not really clear what this does. If you have a gambling device that's currently or in the future might be unlawful, would this take away the criminal penalties?
Yes, because your bill includes the civil provisions of penalties for having that gaming device, and I don't think we need to have both.
So going forward, if the State Patrol walked into a gas station and there is a gaming device, and let's say it's a slot machine or a craps table or a roulette wheel or any of those devices commonly found in a casino, there'd be no criminal sanction for that?
No, but they could turn it over to the Department of Revenue and they would be fined underneath their tax, and they would have a civil penalty that actually is more than the criminal penalty.
Okay, so we're getting rid of the crime of the criminal sanctions for gambling, but making them all civil penalties.
Correct. According to your bill, that yes, it would stay consistent that there would be a civil penalty.
Okay, thank you, Senator Wayne. I'm going to have to oppose AM 1512 as well. If we decriminalize this activity, and we can't even contemplate all of the gambling devices or just how egregious this might be or become in the future, basically, yeah, it's going to cause problems for LB 538. Senator Wayne, can I ask another question?
Senator Wayne, would you yield further?
Yes.
Senator Wayne, is this a concept that started out as a bill and actually had a hearing, or are we going to eliminate criminal sanctions for gambling altogether without a bill ever having been introduced?
Well, your bill created your bill does create an affirmative defense to a criminal prosecution without a hearing, so I was going with that concept.
Yeah, let me go back to the question, and I'll try it again. Is this a concept that started out as a bill that had a hearing in front of General Affairs?
It did not have a hearing in front of General Affairs.
Was it ever a bill?
It was not a bill.
Okay, so it's just an amendment to 538?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Senator Wayne. Colleagues, so we all have an idea where the lane is on a bill before you attach something to it that has never been a bill and never had a hearing. This is outside the rail. This is outside the lane. We're now dealing with something that is more significant than simply addressing the number of machines when a bill deals with those particular kinds of machines. Now we're broadening this out to all gambling devices and not simply the ones that are subject matter of 538 and eliminating criminal penalties. I think that's something that needs to go through General Affairs or Judiciary Committee as it may be referred to or referred by the referencing committee. And again, I would oppose AM 1512. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Senator Wayne.
Colleagues, what you didn't hear is a germaneness issue. Colleagues, what you didn't hear is the fact that there were criminal proceedings or criminal statutes that were a part of this bill in front of General Affairs, and that the First Amendment on the floor that we adopted was an amendment to create, let me repeat, to create an affirmative defense. All I'm doing is eliminating the entire section. So ask yourself, why is it okay to create an affirmative defense to the crime but not eliminate the crime? Why do I need a hearing but that didn't? That doesn't make sense to me. The fact of the matter is, if we're creating a civil penalty, now imagine this. You have two ways the federal government or the Nebraska state government can penalize you. Underneath his original bill, there is no either or. So if you have the gaming device and Senator Holleran sends that exact same gaming device to the Department of Revenue and they determine it to be a gambling device. Now, I didn't send mine, but Senator Holleran sent his. So now that device is a gambling device. Without any notice to me, I also have a gambling device. And because I didn't send it in to the Department of Revenue, correct, I should be penalized. I should be civilly penalized. But if we leave the status quo, not only am I civilly penalized, but that sheriff and prosecutor can charge me with a crime. There's two prosecutions there, an administrative one and a criminal one. I think we have to be consistent. Do we want to have a criminal prosecution for having a gaming device, or do we want to have civil? This bill is saying civil. Civil penalties when you do not comply and you continue to have or maintain a gaming device or sell one. But why are we criminalizing it? Why do we create an affirmative defense for one group but not everybody else? We don't have an affirmative defense for the person at home or the charity who has it stored up and not a retail. My point is, let's eliminate the criminal altogether. Either we're going to have criminal penalties for a gaming device or we're going to have civil penalties. But it shouldn't be both. That's a simple answer. It shouldn't be both. So how I got here is the same way that I've watched Senator Chambers insert that the city of Omaha has to provide free trash service on the floor. The same way that I saw the learning community be created and taken out on the floor. We do things all the time on the floor, and in fact, if a section of law opens up, we have the ability to move it or negotiate it or change it. That door was opened by Senator Lathrop, not me, when he added the affirmative defense. And I am simply removing it completely, the affirmative defense and the underlying crime. With that, I would support a red vote or a green vote on AM 1512, and I appreciate Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Lathrop.
Thank you, Mr. President. More dust, more obfuscation. Senator Wayne, you did a great job, and you're smiling for good reason. It almost sounded like it made sense, but it does not. So imagine, this is the difference. Imagine 538 comes in and we're dealing with machines that, these gray machines, the so-called gray machines. You have a hearing and people come in. Now, if you saw that, you're Joe Citizen, you read what's on the agenda over at General Affairs, and you see that they're going to take up these gray machines. And let's say that you don't like anything, like you're worried about casinos coming to Nebraska. You wouldn't necessarily show up on this bill if the object was to do what Senator Wayne is talking about, turn everything into a civil penalty. But if you came to the hearing on 538, you may say, well, I like these machines, and some people say I don't like them at all, and some people would say, boy, don't let people use credit cards, as we heard on General File, or maybe we should. There's certain things that are expected as part of the conversation on a subject matter, and certain things that are outside that. That's sort of where the line is on whether something needs a separate hearing and a separate bill. I don't know if the guy running that hammer is okay. You didn't put him up to that, Senator Wayne, hopefully. You wouldn't expect somebody to address whether we ought to have civil penalties instead of a criminal code relative to gambling on the 538. You would not find it unusual to have somebody say, yeah, I understand we're going to have these machines, but there ought to be a limit on the number. And that's the distinction between whether, by the way, this is germane. I wouldn't argue that it's not germane, because they both deal with sort of, is it gambling, is it not gambling, what should we do with gambling? But it is something bigger than 538 by such a large amount, or by such a significant change in policy, that it needs its own bill and its own hearing. Colleagues, Senator Wayne has been upfront that he doesn't like 538. He told us that early on. He likes gambling. He likes expanded gambling. And this is simply an effort to allow those people that are operating in this state in violation of the law to continue to do what they're doing. And he would expand gambling at every opportunity. Now, maybe fantasy sports is a good idea. I don't know. After it gets to the floor, we can have a debate, and I'll make up my mind at that point. But 538 addresses a specific issue. These amendments are designed to derail this bill, to talk it to death, to see if it has enough votes to clear a cloture, perhaps. Don't be confused and don't be misled by the amendments. This bill has been thought through, it's been worked through, and I would appreciate your continued support and a red light on 1512. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lathrop. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to close on AM 1512.
Thank you, colleagues. So I was going through the versions of the bill because we were talking about substance changes. I would argue, because the first version of the bill did not have anything to do with I can't even think of the word. When you're charged with a misdemeanor, a way to get around it. I can't think of the word. Senator Breezy, will you yield to a question? Never mind, I can't want to yield. Because I can't think of the word, but I'll think about it. Anyway, how we got here. The first version was straight gambling. All it did was change it from 3 to 4. The amendment added an affirmative defense. That is a fundamental criminal code change. So think about it. If I go and say you have first-degree murder and we're going to allow you an affirmative defense, and I put that on a floor amendment, was what happened, or a committee amendment, but then I come in and say, no, let's strike that out, let's just eliminate it altogether, I think it's all the same. We are fundamentally changing the criminal code by allowing an affirmative defense. All I'm doing is removing the entire, altogether. We cannot have 2 lanes of prosecution. A civil side with a civil penalty, with a criminal side and a criminal penalty. The state of Nebraska has to pick which one it wants. And I think we have enough laws, enough criminal laws on the books. I think that we should decriminalize a criminal device when there is adequate avenue underneath LB 538. There's adequate avenue underneath LB 538 to punish those who have a criminal device in a civil, or a gambling device in a civil way. This is on select file. So out of effort of being a good colleague, I'm going to have more conversations, and I'm probably going to bring it back from final reading to add this to it. Or we can do a straight up and now vote now. But you have to decide if you want to criminalize and allow for the civil prosecution of this matter. You can't have both. Can't have both. I'm pausing because I'm thinking whether I want to withdraw this or not. Because part of me says I want to keep this from hijacking a bill or a poison pill. I didn't look at it as a poison pill, but I guess he does. But part of it is I am looking to decriminalize things where we can. And this is one thing we can. If you don't have the tax stamp, there is a penalty on you for having that machine. But now we're also going to criminalize it? I just fundamentally don't think that's right. With that, I would ask for a green vote.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Have you heard the discussion on AM 1512? The question for the body is the adoption of AM 1512. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
3 ayes, 27 ayes, Mr. President, on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 1512 is not adopted.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne, I now have floor amendment 70, Senator.
Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open on FA 70.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This is part of an ongoing deal. I think Senator Lathrop has another one, so I'm going to go ahead and withdraw this one right now. Thank you.
FA 70 is withdrawn. Further discussion on the bill.
I have, Mr. President, I'm sorry. I have Senator Lathrop, Senator Hughes. You want to withdraw your, Senator? It was, okay, I assume so, thank you. Mr. President, we have an amendment that we just received that's being processed. I understand it's in the system now. And it's from Senator Lathrop.
Senator Lathrop, you're recognized to open on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we've had a lot of discussion about the number of machines. Let me tell you what this amendment does. It changes you earlier accepted an amendment that said no more than 15 or more than 1 per 1,000 square feet in an establishment. We're going to strike that language and replace it with, I'm going to paraphrase because I probably won't say it exactly, a limit of 4 machines per establishment. If you have more than 4,000 square feet in your establishment, you can add a machine for every 1,000 square feet in your establishment up to a maximum of 15. This is an accommodation to the concerns expressed, and I think I heard Senator Brewer and certainly Senator Hughes have expressed concerns. Some BFW clubs and places like that have these will be the legal machines now, have the legal machines in their establishment as sort of a revenue stream that helps keep them afloat. This will allow 4 machines per facility, and if you have more than 4,000 square feet, you can add a machine for each 1,000 square feet you have in your establishment. It is a reasonable compromise. I think it addresses the concerns of some of those charitable, I'll call them the VFW type places that have concerns that these are something their members enjoy and something that provides some supplemental income to help with their charitable purposes. And with that, I would encourage your vote on in support of F.A. Lathrop. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Members' debate is now open on the floor amendment that's being processed. It'll be in your machines in just a moment. Senator Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, Shakespeare intrudes into a lot of things just like the Bible. This really is much ado about nothing, in my opinion. I had opposed when the other senator who used to be here and brought this bill on the sports gambling, they didn't call it that, they called it fantasy. I had opposed it, Senator Larson. I had opposed it because it is gambling, in my opinion. And I decided that if the body wanted to allow that to be done, I'd let them do it, because I believe the court will strike it down. Now, I do know something about sports betting, where you have a bookie and you bet on the outcome of a game. That is gambling, however way you want to cut it. But there is skill that can be applied to any kind of gambling. Oh, I see Senator Wayne. I'd like to ask him a question before he leaves.
Would Senator Wayne please yield?
Yes.
Senator Wayne, going back to this fantasy betting, Las Vegas has a gaming commission or whatever it's called that regulates gambling. Are you aware that that is the commission that would regulate this fantasy activity if it were to be done in Las Vegas legally?
I am not aware of it, Senator Chambers. I would ask that I didn't realize where we were at on time, and I don't want to take this to a full filibuster. And I think we only got like 4 minutes, but I can engage with you on the next bill on that conversation.
I will let it go. I will terminate what I'm saying too then.
Thank you, Senator Chambers and Wayne. Senator Hughes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to chime in quickly on FA 72, the compromise that has been worked out with Senator Lathrop and Senator Albright and myself. I think it is a good compromise, and I would certainly encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Lathrop, you're welcome to close. He waives closing. The question before us is adoption of FA 72 to LB 538. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
42 ayes, no nays on adoption of Senator Lathrop's amendment.
FA 72 is adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Lathrop, you're welcome to close on LB 538.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, thank you for your support on that last amendment. I appreciate your support on LB 538. And Senator Wayne, thank you for your courtesy. He could have talked until this thing got pulled, and he was aware of the time. I appreciate the courtesy, and again, I would appreciate your support of 538. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. The question before us is advancement to ENR engrossing of LB 538. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
40 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
LB 538 is advanced. Mr. Clerk.
Legislative Bill 538A, no ENR. Senator Lathrop, I have AM 1571 in front of me, in front of the A bill, Senator.
Senator Lathrop, you're welcome to open on AM 1571.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. 1571 moves all the revenue and expenditures in LB 538 from the general fund to the Department of Revenue, reflecting the change we just made in the underlying bill. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support of LB 538 and ask you to vote yes or green on the A bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. The question before us is adoption of AM 1571 to LB 538A. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Please record.
38 ayes, no nays on adoption of Senator Lathrop's amendment.
AM 1571 is adopted. Mr. Clerk.
I have nothing further on the bill, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Salama for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 538A be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. LB 538A is advanced. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, a number of things. Bills read on final reading this morning were presented at 10 o'clock to the governor. Enrollment and Review reports the following bills to select file. LB 492, 690, 427, 447, 447A, 315, 281, 454, 260, 726, 476, 505, 374, 248, 571, 571A, 561, and 525. In addition, Mr. President, amendments to be printed. Senator Hilkeman to 298, Senator Colterman 720, Senator Bowles 468, 297, and 294. Resolution, Senator Vargas 125, that'll be laid over. Senator Hunt 126. Executive Board, because it calls for an interim study. In addition, Mr. President, additional bills reported to select file, LBs 609, 719, 719A, 62, 559, 220, 135, 244, 308, 564, 123, 414, 533. Name adds, Senator Blood to LB 433 and 532, Senator Vargas to LR 118. And Mr. President, Senator Wishart would move to recess the body until 1:30 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. We are in recess.